Hi, everyone. Welcome to another AW Author Chat. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Lisa White, the Associate Manager Marketing and Publicity at Albert Whitman and Company. I'm super excited today to be joined by multiple authors of the new middle grade anthology that we released, Coming of Age, which celebrates the Jewish rite of passage, the Menahem Mitzvah. So I'm super excited to talk about everyone's story, share kind of the experience of what they went through and what inspired them to write their book or their portion of the book. So before we get started, I just want everybody to introduce themselves and kind of give a little bit of background about your contribution to the book. Sarah, would you like to start?
Hi, I'm Sarah Aronson, coming to you from Chicago, Illinois, in the neighborhood of Old Town. And I'm so happy to be here today. My submission is called The Assignment, and it's a true story. And the journal entries in my story are actually picked from my original journal, all about my bat mitzvah, which simultaneously happened with the time I found out that my mom knew Abby Hoffman. And so that coming together of discovery and responsibility and growth was all with the backdrop of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the Christmas city, was what I really wanted to write about in this piece.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Melissa?
Oh, hello. I'm Melissa Roska. Here's a copy of the book. I'm holding it. I'm here in Manhattan, and my story is Grandma Merle's Last Wish. Grandma Merle is not my grandma, but she's actually a very dear friend's grandma. She's not real, and she's not anything really like the character exactly, but I love the name. And the main character, Bella, she considers herself barely Jewish because she wasn't really raised in a religious home. And it's really exploring, what does it mean to be Jewish? Do you need to be a special person to be Jewish? Do you need to have a special background or special training? And the answer is in the story.
Awesome. Jonathan?
I am Jonathan Rosen, coming from sunny South Florida, and my story is The Pocket Watch, and mine is sci-fi based. And the reason why I was waiting for everyone else to start submitting, and I wanted to try to be a little bit different, so it wasn't, so we had different variety of stories. So, but it's also explores, like Melissa, what the true meaning of being Jewish is and what the important lessons are, and instead of just for the bar mitzvah, instead of just having the wanting the fancy thing, that the true meaning behind it that the protagonist has to learn.
Awesome. And Henry, take it home for us.
Hi, I'm Henry Hertz. I'm broadcasting live from San Diego, California. My story is Bar Mitzvah on Planet Latka. So it's unlike Sarah's, it's not true. It's another science fiction story about, so on this planet, the aliens didn't have their own religion, so they adopted Earth religions. And so my protagonist, Shlomazel, is struggling. He has a crush on his fellow multi-tentacled classmate, Shana Punim, and it's about him learning the lesson of striking a balance between taking care of others and taking care of himself. With Seinfeld influences, he's kind of like the George Costanza. He's kind of a mess up, and he realizes he needs to do the opposite of what he's been doing.
A good lesson learned. I love it. So yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. I mean, one of the things I really love about this book is, it's an anthology of coming of age, but it's, in which there are stories that are very introspective and about your own experience. But I love that there's also those fiction aspects as well that still captures very much that, period of life where you're starting to become an adult and really transition and come into your own, but from a fiction lens, which is a lot of fun for readers. They get a little bit of both the nonfiction and fiction aspect, which is nice. So to start, I wanted to talk, This is one of the first anthologies that Albert Whitman has really done, which is really exciting to work with so many authors. I wanted to kind of talk, I know Henry and Jonathan, you co-edited this. How did the idea to do this anthology come about? Like, where was the genesis of coming of age?
Um, it really was because wanting to get more Jewish content out there. I don't believe that there was enough Jewish content in middle grade stories, in kidlit in general. And one of the problems was that, I know I've experienced, and I know several other authors who have experienced, being told a story is too Jewish, that it won't, won't sell. So I purposely wanted to get something out there for that reason, and for Jewish, and especially now just because of, all the spiking anti-Semitism. I thought it was important for not only Jewish kids to see themselves in stories, but for other kids, non-Jews, to be able to see, Jews and maybe demystify, I guess, for lack of a better word, and just bring everyone closer together. That people are more alike than they realize. And so, Henry and I had planned to do something previously, and didn't pan out. So approached him with this, and then we reached out to a lot of other authors, and everyone, just about everyone that we asked graciously said yes, and they were anxious they jumped aboard to be involved with this, thankfully.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, something I really like about it, it is focused on the Jewish faith and your experience going through this rite of passage. But I've told so many people, like, the themes are still universal. And I do love that it bridges that gap of, like, yes, this is a Jewish experience, but it's something that everyone goes through as they become, move into adulthood. So it really does capture, like you said, demystifying, the Jewish experience, but also showing that everyone really has that commonality in the world and can understand that experience, which I think is so important, especially in the world that we live in today. Totally. So I do want to ask everybody, and we can kind of roundtable this, but what inspired you to write your piece? Who wants to start? I'll open the floor.
We can go the same order as before. Why don't start with Sarah?
Oh, well, when Jonathan told me what he had planned as the granddaughter of a rabbi, and having this story to that I've told people over the years many, many times, I couldn't wait to, I guess, embarrass myself a little bit and write about I was a terrible student as a young girl and a little bit older than young. And I thought about where I am right now in the feminist movement and Jewish women and what we are doing. And I really wanted to grapple with that moment where I saw myself as something bigger, part of something bigger than just being the sort of outcast girl in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It's not easy feeling different. And I think that all kids can understand that. And when we put it in the framework of faith and religion and ritual, and then the prospect of putting kids on the bima when their voices are changing, that the stakes are high, the understanding is deep.
That's wonderful. Melissa?
It's funny, when Jonathan mentioned this to me and Henry, I needed to come up with something good. I've never written many short stories, and I felt sort of pressure. I thought, what am I going to do that's going to be so different and so amazing and so fantastic? And I really struggled with thinking, what can I possibly do? And then I thought, well, calm down. This is really important to reach deep within and not really worry about what other people will think or what kids necessarily will be impressed by. So it's based on myself very much, that I never, even though my parents, I was raised as a Reformed Jew, they weren't really very observant, and they expected me to be more observant than we really are. So there was always this expectation of, you need to be really Jewish, but they didn't instill that in me. So I was trying to figure out a way to come up with something, not me personally, but a child like me, someone who felt I'm not Jewish enough. I don't deserve to have a bat mitzvah. But what does deserve really mean? So that's part of my story. Who deserves to be Jewish? Think about it. It's a tough question.
Totally.
Everybody.
And I love, that aspect, because I mean, that's a big thing that we work with a lot of our books at Albert Whitman, is wanting the books that we put out for kids to be able to go, oh, I identify with that. I feel seen. That's something that I understand. And I feel like this, this anthology totally gets that, because like I said, it just crosses the spectrum, but it's like, oh yeah, I went through that. I understand. And that helps when you're at that age. Cause like you said, it's an awkward age. Your voice is cracking, you're going through a lot of big emotions. So it's perfect. So yeah, Jonathan, you want to go next?
Sure. With my story, like I mentioned previously, I wanted to do something a little bit different because I was waiting for other stories to come in, because I wanted to try to vary the types of stories a little bit. And I'm always obsessed with time travel and things like that, time travel stories. But what struck me for myself is I was living in Israel at the time of my bar mitzvah, and I had my bar mitzvah at the Western Wall. And a couple of years ago, I went with PJ Library, who I'm hoping will pick up this book, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. But I was with PJ Library on a trip to Israel, and we did visit the wall again. And it really brought me right back again. And I didn't appreciate it as much as a kid as I did now, seeing other kids having their bar mitzvahs at the wall. And it just got me thinking, all these, how many thousands of years had people been doing this? So I wanted the idea of having something linking to the past and seeing the traditions passed on from generation to generation, instead of just, living in the now, that that you are part of that link that goes back, however many thousand years.
That's lovely. That's so special. I love that connection. Henry?
So I love writing fantasy and science fiction. I love injecting humor in my stories. And so I naturally, like Jonathan, I figured, well, I suspected most people were going to write stories in the traditional vein. So I was like, well, I'm going to do something wild and completely different. And here we are. We ended up with 3 science fiction stories out of the 13. But in following the same point that was raised earlier, that these stories are for everyone. They're not just for Jewish kids. And the idea that readers will recognize their own experience in the experience of Jews. And I thought, well, if I put this on an alien planet with weird aliens, I mean, that's as far as you can go. If the lessons apply to them, they apply to everybody. So, and I love Yiddish. The language Yiddish is so funny sounding and has the most hilarious idioms. And so I felt like I needed to put them in there. And then other people put some Yiddish terms. And so we ended up putting a glossary in. And we have we've put together a really funny video. I have a friend whose daughter, she's about 7, really cute. She explains all the terms. She reads the term and gives the definition. I think it's on the Whitman website. It's on mine for sure. Anyway, it's worth watching. It's just a couple minutes. It's very funny. And so just to try and I felt like including some Yiddish was good from a cultural perspective as well. So I just kind of let it rip and let my imagination go wild. I've even got some STEM stuff in there, like about time dilation, relativistic time dilation, and a pun about uranium yellow cake versus the yellow cake that we eat at a bar mitzvah party. And so there's a little bit of everything in there. It was just fun to just let my imagination go crazy.
Totally. Well, also, I'm going to just pause because one of your fellow authors did just actually was able to join us. So I'm going to let Laura in and kind of surprise her that we're in the middle of a recording, but she could introduce herself. So I'll let her go ahead and pop in. Hello, Laura. Are you there? Maybe. Hi, Laura.
Oh my gosh. Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. I think I just had a time zone or maybe a time warp.
I think all authors and librarians and teachers understand when we're working across time zones, it gets a little messy. So the beauty of Zoom is we can all be together. It doesn't matter. No worries.
Thank you. And I'm sorry again, but I'm so happy to see all of your faces.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join us. So we did, we answered a few questions. So just to kind of catch up, if you could introduce yourself and the piece that you wrote.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yes. My name is Laura Chauvin. I'm a poet and a middle grade author. And I wrote a piece called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Bema. Because I'm a theater mom, and so I had to get my Sondheim in there in the story. It is about a girl named Dani Carrot who is looking for advice for her Devar Torah speech, which she's very nervous about. And one piece of advice is more outlandish than the next. I had to call my brother for a good fart joke, which he very, very lovingly provided to me for this story. So it's a too many cooks story, and eventually Dani has to figure out, which advice is the best that she should follow for her speech.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. I'm so happy to have everybody.
Thanks.
Like I said earlier, I've met with Jonathan and Henry, but to get to meet the other authors is really special. And I'm glad that we can share that with folks in this video. So
I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah. So the next question I have, I like to ask authors, was there anything memorable or new that you learned writing this piece, or anything surprising that, you didn't expect going in as a writer? And then, we'll just do the same order. Sarah? Or do you want me to switch?
I think we should do opposite order.
So go to Laura first.
We'll let Laura get at her bearings, but okay, we'll do opposite. Henry, you want to go first?
I don't know if I have anything to say regarding my own story. This is the third anthology, the third anthology that I've edited. It's not really surprising. It's more delightful that when you read all the different takes, it's like a school assignment. Everybody got the same writing prompt, but the results were quite varied. So again, it was a surprise in a good way in terms of just seeing all the different directions people took. I never would have guessed we'd have 2 time travel stories in there, but that's really all I have.
I love it. And it's nice to see the thread, I think, as an editor too. You get all these things and you start to edit and put together and you're like, oh, I can see where everything carries through. It's a very neat experience. Jonathan, what about you?
Yeah, I'm not sure I learned new, but it was nice for me to start thinking about, traditions and again, like I said before, passing down traditions and the importance of, linking from one generation to the next. That was one of the things that really did strike me while writing it. It brought back a lot of memories for me and a lot of, warm feelings towards my religion and, traditions.
That's awesome. Melissa?
It's funny, one surprise, I thought I was going to write about my own bat mitzvah. That I went in sure, I'll write about my own bat mitzvah. But my own bat mitzvah was held in an Italian nightclub. And the only reason it was held there is it was close to the temple. And not to speak badly of my parents, because, my mom's great and I love my dad, but they were a little lazy. So this place just happened to be across the street from the temple. So I thought, okay, great, I'll write about that. But then it seemed so outlandish that I just wasn't connecting to it. And the idea of a girl who didn't get to have a bat mitzvah in a real hall or a restaurant, that sort of snuck up on me. And I thought, well, wait a minute, what if you have a bat mitzvah in a rabbi's study? And it just came to me and it surprised me. So my Italian nightclub bat mitzvah did not go anywhere near my story.
I love that it was still the inspiration along
Yes.
with Sarah, what about you?
Well, the word learn and my writing generally don't have much to do with each other. I am more about sort of really embarking on the emotion and the pivot points of life that change us and make us who we are. And that our role as adults, and in this case as Jewish adults, is to shine a light from that child's eye and to think about all the emotions and that are involved in this moment, and how we change and how we face these obstacles, how we face negativity, how we even accept positivity in that moment. And so it really, like, as I was writing the piece, of course, I had great conversations with my mom. Thanks, Mom, for saving those pictures. I also was able to think about myself as a young girl. This is the first time I've ever wrote memoir, and thought about who was that girl right then? What was she feeling? And what do her feelings say to both Jewish and not Jewish readers?
That's really great. Laura, what about you?
I am going to cheat a little bit and say what I learned is from a different story than my own. I'm going to say I learned from Barbara Botner's story about the second ever bat mitzvah of New York City. I didn't know the history of the first bat mitzvah in New York City, and I learned so much from that story. And so that one, as a woman, that one really resonated with me. I also grew up close to New York City, so and the theater thing, of course. So I feel like I learned from other people's stories. I learned also from my own, because at some point I had to consult with a very helpful rabbi to pick the correct Haftorah section for my character that would fit the themes of the story, which the rabbi was very helpful in giving me some direction there. But I pick Barbara's story as my learning moment.
I love that. I love that, you can share that you've learned from your fellow authors, and that communal aspect of this book, which, it really does champion community and the experience that everyone shares, which I just adore because it's so important in the world. So Sarah and Melissa kind of reminded me, as you guys were talking about your own bat and bar mitzvahs. If folks don't know, we had a very lovely contest where the authors were sharing their I like to call blunder years photos, like the really great photos of that age. And if you haven't seen them, you can go to AW's Twitter, and I have reposted a lot of them. But I was hoping maybe you all could share maybe a favorite memory or a ridiculous memory, like an Italian nightclub, from your own bat and bar mitzvah. We'll flip it again. So Sarah.
All right, so in preparation of my bat mitzvah, I was the third bat mitzvah in my synagogue. And the rabbi in general basically said, do the service, I'm sitting in the seats, and gave us all the responsibility. And that responsibility is such we want it, and then we sort of don't want it. In any case, what I remember most about my bat mitzvah, besides all the things I wrote in my story and the necklace, was that my mom, because we were having a jazz cantata that my uncle had written about the Jewish calendar, my mother didn't want to spend any money on a reception. Sorry, Mom, for spilling the beans. So for 6 months, she baked cookies. She doesn't like to bake, and stored them in neighboring freezers all over the place. And for the next 4 years, people would start coming back like, you left these cookies in our freezer. And so we really celebrated my bat mitzvah for a very long time.
I love that. The continuous celebration of cookies. That's lovely.
Of frozen cookies.
Melissa, what about you?
I remember what really is so clear to me. I was painfully shy as a child, and I was very small and underdeveloped. There was really nothing that screamed 13-year-old when you looked at me. I looked at like I was 8 or 9. So I remember being so embarrassed to be in front of people on this huge bima. And my bat mitzvah was held at Central Synagogue, which is one of the oldest and hugest temples in New York City. It's ginormous. So there was little me, and I'm forced to be on this huge bima, and I'm terrified. I could barely see over anything. I was just not happy to be there. Really painful. So I remember I started peeling. There's velvet underneath I don't know what you'd call it, but it was a box, and the Torah was resting on the box. And it was peeling the velvet, peeling it. And there were strings coming off because I was so nervous, and I'm sweating and peeling. And I just remember being so grateful when it was over and I could get off the stage. But then at the party, I relaxed. My friends were there, and it was all good. But I just remember the fear of being in the spotlight and having people staring at me. I just did not like it at all.
I like that you shared that, because I feel like I talked to a lot of people when they've gone through their bar mitzvah. It's kind of the first time for the focus to be on you, like as an adult. And it's a very special experience, but also, like you said, very intimidating, because when you're a kid, you don't really have that kind of experience. So to have all eyes be on you and realize you can command a room and get attention, it's a special experience.
Special is the right word.
Jonathan, what about you?
My bar mitzvah, like I said, I was living in an absorption center in Jerusalem during the time of my bar mitzvah. So there were immigrants from all over the world living in this one, housing complex. So, for my bar mitzvah, they were like, Russians, Americans, Argentinians, and, from all over. And we did not have a lot of money. And so we did have we held my party, I guess, in the bomb shelter of the absorption center. And since like I said, not a lot of money, so not a lot of being able to cater it, everyone helped out and brought food, made food for it. So we had dishes from all over the world at my bar mitzvah, and that always stays in my my memory. And it was very nice. Like I said, looking back at it now, I appreciate it so much more than at the time. But it was really lovely.
So that's such a lovely memory of like everyone coming together and celebrating community. That's lovely. Thanks for sharing. Henry, what about you?
So my experience was more like Melissa's than Jonathan's. The level of dread I had and fear of and embarrassment of the idea of singing in public. First of all, as a boy at that time, singing was a girly thing, and I didn't want to be standing up in front of everybody. And so literally I can remember from maybe age 6 onward, every time I hit a birthday, I would be like, it's okay, it's 7 years away. It's okay, it's 6 years away. It's like this runway of dread. And I think, people that have not attended a bar mitzvah don't realize that you have this 13-year-old who's, struggling like every 13-year-old with their place in the world and how they see themselves. You have basically leading a religious service. You are reading in a foreign language and singing in a foreign language, and you are giving a speech about how you interpret the Torah portion for that day. It is a big deal. I mean, most adults would be challenged to do that. And so for a 13-year-old, it's really a big deal. And so mostly I just remember that, I'm very glad that I did it and my children did it, but it was scary. And it's like, hey, you come out the other side though with some boost to your self-confidence. Hey, I did something that's really hard. So it's a good life lesson. If you put your mind to it and you work hard, you can do just about anything.
Yeah, I think that also touches on, the universal aspect of this book, which is like, it is scary, but as we learn, especially as adults, but as you're learning as a kid, sometimes the scary things are the best things, and what comes out of it is really an incredible thing. That's awesome. What about you, Laura?
All right, so 2 things you've all given me time to think about it. Thank you very much. One is Melissa and I had a really interesting conversation about what we wore for our for our parties, for our ceremonies. And Melissa, you had that beautiful kind of like long dress with your cute little shoes and white socks, athletic socks. I remember I had a dress that would have been at home in an office in New York City circa 1983. It was magenta with blue pinstripes and a white collar and a blue bow tie. It was like an afternoon. I think looking back on it, when Melissa and I were talking, I really think I wanted people to take me seriously. So I was dressed like a 30-year-old businesswoman for my bat mitzvah. That's one thing. The second thing, in hearing what all of you are saying, it's funny, I'm very sensory in my writing, and what I remember most is reading with the yad, the pointer that we use when we're reading the Torah. And there was something about that, the idea of that we needed, that we're not allowed to touch directly the scroll, that we have this object that we hold, and we all hold when we're reading the lines of the text. For some reason, it was that communicated the enormity of what was happening to me at that time. I just have a very vivid memory of holding the gold yad, which is shaped like a little pointer finger. Like, there's a name for that, isn't there? That there anyway. So that for me, that was the thing that I really sticks out at me as being the symbol of I'm doing something important today.
None of us have said this, but in the Torah, there are no vowels.
Right.
And so when you're reading from the Torah, and you practice it for a while, but it's this strange sensory, spiritual moment where you have to do not just speak in another language, but speak in another language with a scroll that's handwritten with no vowels. And so that moment is so empowering and so mystical. And I mean, I was, does it surprise anyone? I was not nervous. I was the Torah on Broadway, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get up there and say what I had to say. I think as a religious school director, which I did for many years, that to see one after the next of children come forward and take their place and do whatever they can do, they're all different, and to say whatever they have to say is the bar mitzvah. And bat mitzvah is not just a celebration, a special day for the kid. It's really for the community, where we welcome the child into the community as an adult. And that to be said, well, now you're an adult. Again, responsibility. It's a huge moment.
Totally. Thank you for saying that, Sarah. Because I think I mean, we think about it and we know it's a big moment, but for a kid, but like you said, for the community itself, and welcoming people with their open arms and saying, welcome to what you are part of this now. And that's a really beautiful thing. And that kind of ties to, so I'm going to wrap up here with our last question. It kind of ties to it. With this book and your story, well, the book especially, but it can be a 2-year story as well. What do you hope that a reader takes away from it after reading Coming of Age? And how about I start with, we'll flip it around again, and I'll start with Laura.
So I'll focus on my story for this one. For me, it was important to show allyship, that my main character, Danny Carrot, has these 2 best friends, Nerf and Astrid, and they have questions about her bat mitzvah, but their main role in the story is they're supporting her. Yes, they're giving very outlandish advice, including doing K-pop choreography of the 10 plagues, but ultimately they're there as her support system. And I just wanted to show that friends, middle school age friends, can support each other going through these traditions and experiences, even when they're not their own traditions and experiences. And it was important for me to show that this is how we do allyship, is that, you can be there for a friend, even if they're going through something that you have never and will never experience.
That's really beautiful. Henry?
So I would recall Jonathan's comment that one of the reasons we did this anthology was to combat rising anti-Semitism. And if you get analytical for a second, hate comes from fear, and fear comes from not understanding. And so the goal for me and in this anthology was to share stories so that non-Jewish readers could, the Jewish readers can celebrate their own traditions, and the non-Jewish readers can see that a 13-year-old is a 13-year-old regardless of your religion. You're experiencing the same emotions and doubts, and the idea being, you know what, these characters are no different than I am, and there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to hate there.
That's so important. I love that. Jonathan?
Yeah, the same. I like Jewish kids to be able to see themselves as the stars of the story, and not the friend, and especially the stereotype is like the nerdy friend. So I want them to see themselves as the stars of the story, and other kids the same thing, to see that I'm not going through a bar mitzvah, but I have the same fears. I have the same something in my life that's going on, and that I can compare to this, or that we're more like the same thing. We're more alike than similar. So that is what I want and hope that people can take away from this.
For sure. And to kind of touch on something you said earlier too, like, I love the fact that this is a middle grade book, because like you said, there isn't a lot, even though this is an experience you're going through at that age, there still isn't a lot of stuff about, that experience for middle graders specifically. It's more reflective, situation as an adult thing, or I've seen a lot of like picture books that, celebrate the rite of passage, but yeah, there's not a lot of content for middle graders as they're in it. So I love that aspect that this book does. Melissa, what about you?
I think I wanted to show that there's not one way to do anything, whether it's to have a bat mitzvah, or it's how to play the tuba, or how to write a story, that every child is different, their needs are different, and it's important to show that it's not just one way to do something. And in my story, the main character didn't have a traditional bat mitzvah. And our world is not traditional anymore. We need to be open to new ways of doing things and taking people's differences into consideration. So whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, that was my main purpose, just to say you can do something and it doesn't have to be the way everyone else is doing it.
That's awesome. And Sarah, you want to take us on home?
All right, I'm going to take us on home with the word empathy. This is about empathy. It's about understanding people who are not like you. It's about celebrating who you are. When I was a child, the great contradiction of my childhood was that at the same time that I was uncomfortable with being different, I didn't want to be mainstream. I didn't want to be gently Jewish or put that in the corner. And I also wanted to be like everyone else. It was back and forth. And what I love about where children's literature is going right now is that now the girl who felt insecure about being menorah girl or matzah girl is now blowing the shofar with classrooms, introducing kids to latkes, and writing a book about her bar mitzvah. And that is awesome.
Exactly. I love you touched on that, because I do think, that's something with children's book authors. A big part of it is writing that book for the self that, you were when you were a kid, and getting to see that and being like, oh, middle school me would be so proud of myself. So that's a really special thing.
And Lisa, before we go, I want to thank you, and everyone at Whitman has been so great during this whole experience. You've been there for every little thing that we've needed, and really appreciate that, and all the support you've thrown behind this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Like I said, we are just very honored to be able to put something out like this in the world, because AAW we want kids to feel acknowledged, seen, and heard, and coming of age definitely does that for so many kids, not only in the Jewish faith but outside of it as well. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. So once again, the book, I think, Melissa, you have it. If you want to hold it up, I don't have a copy. I haven't gotten mine. Everyone beat me to get a copy, so I might get them to next week. But the book is Coming of Age. It's 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories. It shares the experience of Bat and Bar Mitzvahs. It is available now from Albert Whitman and Company. You can get it from your favorite bookseller, wherever it's everywhere where books are sold. Thank you everyone for joining me today. It was a lovely discussion. Make sure if you'd like to check out more author chats with AW authors, check out our YouTube page. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.